Someone tells Sumo to reveal his ambition and to admit that he is guilty in front of everyone in that hall. Immobile, Sumo says he now understands the direction things have taken. Looking at her defiantly, he asks if the poison in his body is her doing and says it must have been from the glass of wine he drank last night. Staring him down, she says it was because of him that the minister lost his position. With her hand on the blade, she says that his feelings for her are his reward. Sumo acknowledges that sword called Hushi was something he sought for her. He just never imagined it would one day be pointed at him. She remembers the times when Sumo took care of her when she was younger. Even when she was in danger, he protected her. But now she says he disappoints her. He will be buried in the Imperial Mausoleum and receive offerings every year. Sumo sees the contrast between the kind girl he raised and the cruel empress before him, and she thrusts the sword into his chest. In the hall, everyone is incredulous. Sumo acknowledges that this is the end for him, so it's time to activate the reincarnation scripture. As he closes his eyes, he sees a blue butterfly, which after flying over the void lands on his chest and he awakens, inside what seems to be an ancient carriage. With a monotonous tone, he remembers since he reincarnated in this world, he did everything for the Empress to ascend to the throne. He carefully helped Leo Ruoxu practice. He thought that way he would change his fate. But now enough is enough, he won't make the same mistakes. Suddenly someone pulls a curtain and asks if he needs anything. He says he's okay, and the guy says it will take half an hour to reach the orphanage. Sumo remembers it was in this orphanage that he first met Leo Ruoxu, so he tells the guy it's alright and tells them to continue. He knows that at this moment, Ruoxu is still a helpless orphan, but this time he won't train her. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, several children are preparing for his arrival. At that moment, Leo Ruoxu also returned to the past. With her hands on her head, she remembers a memory. The empire was in flames with everyone fleeing. She was sitting on the throne, while the guys around her said she should be careful, since she was the hope of that place. But Ruoxu said she was waiting for someone. Suddenly, a window broke and someone entered the room. The Empress's subjects ordered the witch to leave that place. She smiled, saying they were very loyal, and suddenly their heads exploded. The witch said there was finally no one to stop her, and asked how Ruoxu was. With her hand on the throne, Ruoxu was already trembling, while saying that she really had appeared. Cao Yang, my friend, welcome to the work and congratulations. Cao Yang tells her it was unexpected for her to be taken from the orphanage, and to have lived as an empress in wealth while she starved. With her hand on her chin, she says that even so, she lost. And does she happen to want to know the reason? Ruoxu removes her hand and asks why. Cao Yang approaches and says it was because she killed Sumo. Pulling out the sword, she explains it was impossible to invade this dynasty with Sumo here. Ruoxu is about to ask what she should have done, when suddenly the sword embeds in the mountain. I don't know if it's long enough to reach the bottom, but she can try. Looking down from above, the witch says she got drunk on power and killed Sumo without remorse, so she doesn't deserve to be called empress. Falls to the side, realizing it was all her fault. If she could go back in time, she would be different with Sumo. And with that, she loses consciousness. That's when suddenly she woke up back at the orphanage, with the child asking if she was okay. She said she was okay, so the child told her to change clothes. Since some nobles were coming, Ruoxu remembered right away. This was the day Sumo adopted her. She feels happy thinking she will finally be able to meet him again and now do the right things. The orphanage guy tells everyone to change and go quickly. In the orphanage courtyard, several children are playing. One of them has white hair and seems impressed with everything. However, the orphanage owner asks why she, Cao Yang, is outside, the same name as the witch from before. Embarrassed, she apologizes, saying she will hide from the nobles. But she becomes sad, saying she also wanted to see who it was. With the children already organized, someone asks to see them all. It's at that moment that Cao Yang and Ruoxu see Sumo for the first time. Steam Ruoxu, Sumo already thinks that in this life they will have no bond, while Ruoxu is anxious because he finally appeared. The vendor announces that they tested the bones of all the children and their level is well above normal. To be adopted as slaves or for anything else, they are perfect. He then approaches Sumo and says one of the children has a very good bone structure. Pointing in Ruoxu's direction, Sumo looks at her, who clearly has a disdainful expression. The vendor warns that her price is a little higher. Sumo says money is not a problem, and he notices that the girl with white hair has a similar aura to the witches. Pointing, he asks who she is. The vendor says she's Cao Yang, the worst they have. Her bones are extremely weak. Then he yells at her, telling her to disappear from in front of the nobles. Sumo wonders what the course of history would be if he took her. She's biting her lip and crying, and Sumo recognizes that it's really her. Suddenly, she lifts her head with tears, stands up, and runs towards him, embracing him. She begs to be taken away from there. She promises to work hard for him for the rest of her life. Suddenly, the vendor grabs her by the hair and pulls her back. But Sumo tells him to stop. The merchant lets her go, and she stands up again and begs Sumo to take her away once more. He asks if she really wants to be taken. Trembling, she says yes. He asks if she's sure she would do anything for him. She says that as long as the young master takes her away, she's willing to do anything for him. Sumo smiles at that, while in the background, Ruaksui is disbelieving. She can't understand what's happening. The story wasn't supposed to take this turn. She should have been chosen by Sumo. He must have made some mistake. That made her world shatter. The vendor is also disbelieving because he carefully chose Ruaksui. He then asks the Marquis if he will only take one child. Sumo is already leaving with Chao Yang. He turns around and asks if he has anything else to say. The vendor again mentions Ruaksui, saying she's the greatest talent there. Sumo asks if he really wants to impose something on him. The vendor is startled, trembling, saying that this inferior being wouldn't dare do such a thing. When suddenly Ruaksui runs towards him, calling for him. She grabs his cloak and begs to be taken too. The vendor tells her not to do that and to stop being stupid. Ruaksui grabs his cloak, squeezing tightly, while the vendor tells both of them to stop bothering the Marquis, and Ruaksui feels relieved. He grabs her arm and she smiles, finally going to be taken by the Marquis, but he throws her to the ground. She falls, disbelieving, wanting to know what he did. Sumo smiles because after 100 years, she hasn't changed her nature. With that, forming a crack in Ruaksui's expectations, he leaves, saying he will only take Chao Yang. While Ruaksui wonders how things ended up like this, suddenly, the vendor tells Sumo to wait. If he wants to take only Chao Yang, it will cost 200 more rocks. Sumo laughs at this and asks how he dares to ask for spiritual rocks from him. He asks what will happen if he doesn't pay, and the vendor says he won't leave so easily. He orders some ninjas to attack Sumo from behind and asks if he's sure he can really do anything against him. In an instant, both are struck in the chest. With a single hand movement, they are already on the ground, while another part of the group comes to attack Sumo. The vendor tries to take advantage of the distraction to run away. Sumo says he leaves things to Mr. Wang. The bandits are all scared and beams of light cut through the sky. Fallen on the ground, the vendor begs to be spared. He kneels, saying he would give all the spiritual rocks and any treasure Sumo wants. However, he is thinking since Sumo is interested in the girl, he just needs to take her as a hostage. He then quickly gets up and goes in her direction. At the moment he is about to grab her, his arm flies off. Seeing his arm torn off, he is disbelieving while Sumo is just staring at him on the ground. Sumo warns Chao Yang that from now on only he can kill her, and she gets excited about it. A sword appears and Sumo orders her to kill him. She hesitates, but Sumo says he knows she must be suffering because of him constantly. She remembers when she was eating and he would knock her food down because she was weak. She was beaten just for not kneeling when she saw him. Facing the sword, she hesitates but is really going to kill someone. Sumo says what happens in this orphanage is terrible. Moving forward and taking his life is understandable. The merchant is begging her to let him go, but she is advancing towards him. He keeps begging, saying she would have died if it weren't for him. Like Vegeta, she says he is a miserable person who said she should have been killed. He says he will never forgive her, but he already had one leg cut off. He starts begging her to kill him quickly instead of just chopping off his limbs, but she is cruel and cuts off another arm. She continues to strike in every possible way so that he doesn't die until after a while. Sumo says he is already dead, good job. She tells Sumo that she obeyed the young master's orders, and he warns her that anyone who harms her now will die. The carriage guy asks what they should do with the other orphans, and Sumo tells him to give them some money and let them go. Ruaksui, seeing the two from afar, begs him to wait. She knows she can't stay here. She has to find a place soon to improve her strength. In the carriage, he asks Chao Yang if she's hungry, and she says she's not. But her stomach growls, and she says maybe a little. He sets up a banquet from his dimensional ring's table, and she's impressed. She starts eating, and Sumo warns her that he will have to restrain her body. Once the restriction is established, she will never be able to disobey his orders again. He approaches and says he will give her one more chance to leave and forget the past. But excited, she says she has made her decision and won't turn back. He then puts his hand on her head and tells her to relax and not give up. She feels as if chains are being passed through her body and the contract is finalized. She is scared when Sumo asks her to strike him. Just the thought of doing so causes her chest to ache. Sumo warns that this is the effect of the restriction. Any kind of thought against him will cause pain. The The carriage guy then announces they have arrived at the mansion. Shumo tells them to arrange a room for her and take her to bathe. The helper then calls her and starts showing her the mansion. She's impressed with everything around her, and then he shows her the room that will be hers. Her eyes shine and she thinks she doesn't deserve so much, so she runs out saying she can't stay there. Embarrassed, she says it's better to live in a more compatible place for her. But the helper informs her that this was the Marquis's choice, so she can't go against it. Still somewhat embarrassed, the guy leaves, saying she should change clothes and they'll take her to eat. She thinks the young master is being too good to her. Sumo walks through the city thinking that maybe that item wasn't bought. A boy nearby argues with the vendor, saying the jade pendant he wants to sell isn't worth even 20 spiritual rocks. The vendor says 20 rocks don't cover the cost he had to obtain it. He wants at least 50. The boy insists he'll pay 30, but the vendor still finds it too little. Suddenly, someone offers 100 spiritual rocks. The vendor is shocked, and Sumo immediately puts the rocks on the table, asking if that's an acceptable price. Seeing it's the Marquis, the vendor wants to increase the price, but Sumo threatens him, and with that, he agrees to sell. The boy next to him insists he saw it first, but Sumo just takes it from the vendor's hand, thinking he's still ahead of this boy. Linyi is the protagonist of this novel. He's an orphan who can detect spiritual objects. He embarks on a journey where he finds this pendant and manages to strengthen himself, changing his life. But now Sumo is already leaving, saying they won't cross paths again. As Linyi gets up, he's sure that pendant is something he's never seen before. It's a treasure. One day, this Marquis will pay for what he did. On the horizon, he sees a beam of light. He says maybe it's another great opportunity besides the jade pendant. Sumo is in a kiss with a glow in his hand. The jade with a blue aura is breaking. From it, two lights emerge, a scroll and the gold ring. The scroll is the key to the spirit of the cloud. Using it, one can become very strong, even reaching the celestial realm. They say in that place there are great opportunities for growth left by the immortals, and the ring is the key to that secret place. In this life, Sumo will monopolize all of this. He returns home and the butler greets him, saying he took the little girl to the third room in the east wing. Sumo says he'll go get her then. He arrives at the location and the maids greet him. In Chaoyang's room, the maids are giving her a bath, and she's apologizing for them doing that. They say it's no problem and leave the room. In the bathtub, she thinks it's the first time in her life she's had a bath like this. Suddenly, the Marquis is at the door. She feels embarrassed, wanting to grab her clothes and can't enter. The Marquis opens the door and she asks him to wait. She hides underwater and Sumo realizes what's happening and leaves, apologizing. She says it's okay. Sometime later, she also apologizes for making him wait. He says it's okay and that dress looks good on her. She thanks him, and they go to eat something. When they arrive to eat, they are greeted by everyone and a feast has been prepared. Chaoyang is drooling over so much food. Before the guy says anything, she's already devouring everything, even turning over the soup pots. Everyone thinks she's eating too much. The warrior got chubby. She apologizes embarrassedly and tells Sumo she's not used to eating that much. Sumo asks to tell the chef to prepare 3 meals and tells Chaoyang to come with him, and she jumps happily. They go to the room and it's the spirit of the cloud scroll. He leaves, telling her to read and practice. Meanwhile, the vendor found out there was something inside the jade, and now he's angry. An old man with long hair appears and the vendor apologizes. The guy introduces himself and asks a question. Did he happen to see the jade pendant from that painting? The vendor is startled, another one wanting that pendant. In the mansion, Sumo is helping Chaoyang strengthen herself. She's progressing very quickly, as expected of such a talented witch. But suddenly, she feels something. A shock runs through her body and she spits blood. Sumo lifts her and pats her back, telling them to bring the blood doctor. Meanwhile, Linyi found the place from which the energy came. He opens the door and sees Roxu practicing and wonders if she's the opportunity for him. He takes a step back and steps on a twig. He gets startled and suddenly, Roxu has a twig at his neck, asking who he is. Linyi introduces himself and says he's a nomadic orphan. Hearing that name, Roxu wonders if it's the same person. There, Roxu remembers the time someone with that same name appeared, saying he would deliver all the treasures of the world to her. But Sumo told her to refuse that guy. If he really can find treasures, it will help her improve her cultivation. She then lets him fall to the ground and asks if he wants to travel with her for a while. Linyi is somewhat confused, saying it's sudden, but she's already leaving. The doctor tells Sumo that Chaoyang has a condition called celestial feather body, and she's deteriorating. He says he can prepare a medicine to alleviate the symptoms, but she will suffer greatly during the treatment. He leaves, saying it's a temporary solution. The only way to resolve this is by obtaining the jade-colored herb to cure this disease. The doctor leaves and Sumo thanks him. Chao Yang heard everything he said. She gets up, saying she'll strive in training and doesn't need to worry. Sumo warns her she'll suffer great pains, but she says she's not afraid. He then leaves the room saying they will travel tomorrow, and he hopes she keeps her promise. He takes a bag of herbs and says it will help alleviate her pain. Happily, she thanks him. That night in Chao Yang's room, she looked at the herbs, all happy she had received a gift from him. She knew she couldn't waste time. She resumed practicing and began to feel the pain he talked about. The next day, when Sumo went to the dining room, she was already there eating a lot as usual. Sumo warned her to be careful not to vomit as they were leaving. With a jump, he flew away from the mansion. They went to the Jade Dragon Range, a place deep in the mountains. Chao Yang was tired, but he said there was no time. She heard some noise and asked what that sound was. From the bushes, a tiger was emerging, which suddenly attacked them both. Chao Yang threw herself in front of Sumo to protect him. With her eyes closed, she thought she'd be a burden to the young master. But Sumo had already frozen the tiger in midair while thinking about the boarding herbs nearby. He closed his eyes and said that tiger didn't deserve to be there and disintegrated its flesh. What fell to the ground was a pile of bones, which with the end of the ability, turned back into a tiger now harmless. He raised his arms and brought the boarding herbs to his hand. With the harvest done, he told Chao Yang they would go to a cave. There they made a barbecue with the tiger. She was about to eat, saying it was delicious, when Sumo told her to control her breathing. She got scared, and when she looked outside, she saw someone coming and asked who it was. Sumo warned they were sect members, which was very strange. He said he didn't know what they were planning, but if they interfered with the plans, they would have to die. Nearby, Ruoxu was confused as to why there were so many people in that forest. Linyi pointed in a direction, saying he saw traces of a battle. Both were confused. All the spiritual items were being taken before they arrived. She wondered if it was the sect or Sumo's doing. Then she ran, thinking the only chance now was to find the alchemy furnace and start making elixirs. She told Linyi if he was scared, he should stay behind. He tried to say the night was dangerous, but she was already far away. In that same cave the next day, Chao Yang woke up. After practicing, she passed out. Touching her forehead, Sumo said he was impressed with how quickly she was evolving, considering her condition, and she was happy with the compliments, but he warned her to be careful. Her body wouldn't withstand all this pressure. But she said she just wanted to be able to help the young master. With that, he began to leave the caves, saying they had to disappear from there as soon as possible. He handed her a medicine, saying she should use it to alleviate the pain in the next training. Once again, she was grateful. Sumo was already ahead, saying not to stand still and to keep up. They were in the dense forest looking for the furnace. Sumo told her to be careful because the jade serpent protected it. From afar, they saw an explosion and already knew someone was there. Sumo approached and was surprised. It was Linyi fighting the jade serpent, which had just taken a blow. From the ground, Linyi told something to come out soon. Seeing the serpent's attack, he realized he would have to face it. It opened its mouth and Linyi jumped to kill it. But Sumo shouted from afar that he was an idiot. The boy was sure this time the creature would die. However, he got a shock. Just as he was about to attack, the dragon recoiled and hit him hard with its tail. He was thrown against a tree, hitting his back, and started spitting blood. The serpent approached him lying on the rocks, thinking it was the end. When suddenly, Sumo appeared in front of him. The serpent attacked him, but Sumo said it was their destiny to meet. But now he would take this core. The serpent began to cast a spell, and Linyi was impressed that she could use spiritual power. An explosion swept through the forest. The serpent was confident, but in the midst of the smoke, Sumo was unscathed. The monster and Linyi were incredulous, and Sumo began to approach her. But at that moment, she turned and went in another direction. He called Chao Yang's name, saying she would do her part. A barrier appeared in front of the serpent, which protected herself from the attack and counterattacked. Chao Yang realized there was no way to escape, and the snake was about to bite her. But suddenly, a spiritual hand held the snake in place. Sumo closed his hand, commanding it to die, and with that, it was shattered. The pieces fell to the ground, and Sumo found what he wanted, while Chao Yang cried, realizing how weak she was. Sumo corrected her, saying it was because of her that he got the core in perfect condition. The serpent needs to die without any fear. Only then can you get a perfect core. As she died attacking Chao Yang, she died without fear. He applied ointment to her legs, saying she did a great job, and with that, he told them to go. She was happy. It was the first time she had been praised. Linyi recognized that it was the same Marcus as before. But what was this guy doing there? Does he know the secret of the furnace? He starts to leave, thinking he can't be caught by him. When suddenly Sumo appears, asking where he thinks he's going. Awkwardly, Linyi says nowhere. He's very calm. Sumo asks if he's alone. Reluctantly, he says he stayed behind for someone. Sumo turns, asking if he saw any cultivators. Lin Yi says yes, they went one way and the tip the other. But Sumo ignored him and went the other way, leaving him confused. It's the direction of the cave where Ruaksui is. Already inside the cave, Sumo finds it strange. He smells blood. He goes to the back of the cave and is startled. There's a pile of bones where the smell came from. This is another discrepancy with his memories. He recognizes them as disciples of the Storm Sect. What were they doing in the Jade Dragon Range? These guys aren't weak, so this shouldn't happen here. He then squats down to pick up one of the bags on the ground, but feels someone is there with him. Looking back, he sees no one, so he decides to check if he's still there. Inside the bag, he finds the furnace, but once again, he feels someone is there. But when he looks, he sees nothing. He decides to see if someone is hiding. But suddenly, a scream from outside asks to be freed. Sumo runs, recognizing it was Chao Yang's voice. Inside the cave, Ruaksui is hiding. She realized that Sumo is taking things and is sure that damned witch Chao Yang is making him work for her. She found everything she wanted in that cave. When suddenly Sumo appeared, she begins to wonder if he took the furnace too. Seeing one of the bags, she realizes he took it. She thought, saying now only trash is left. She will have to flee from there. Outside the cave, Chao Yang is cornered. A guy points at her, asking what she's doing there. She tries to leave but gets shocked by the prison. Then she says she has no idea what they're talking about. But the guys are sure because there are traces of who they're looking for in the cave she came out of. The guy points and says that there is the territory of the Jade Serpent and she is very weak. So what is she doing there? How did she survive? He grabs her by the neck and asks where the serpent is, threatening to sell her because she's pretty. She begs to be released, but he continues to threaten her, unaware that something has already passed over his arm. He lifts the stump of his arm and Chao Yang seizes the opportunity, grabbing the rest of his arm and tossing it away. They want to know who did this and demand they show themselves. Then Sumo appears in front of them and breaks the prison that Chao Yang is in. She apologizes for getting captured, but the guys call him despicable and move to attack, saying he'll die. One Sumo has his eyes closed. He pulls out 4 scrolls and says they're for Chao Yang. She prepares herself and the scrolls surround the guys, who realize they're restriction talismans. All the power they had is sealed and they're shocked. Meanwhile, in front of them, Chao Yang starts activating hers. She's confident and Sumo tells her to leave at least one alive. Drawing a spear, she says she understands, then leaps at them as they plead not to be killed. With a rather sinister smile, she cuts through them all until only Hong is left and she seems about to finish him off. But instead, she grabs him by the leg and takes him to Sumo, saying she's done. She throws the guy in front, who's foaming at the mouth, then enters and hands everything they were carrying over to Sumo. He says he can stay, he doesn't want him. In his left hand, he forms an energy ball and sends it into the guy's chest, who suddenly wakes up. Sumo says it's good, he answers and asks his name. The guy starts asking who he is and why he killed his comrades. He prays to Chao Yang, who agrees and summons her spear. Desperate, the guy kneels and introduces himself as a disciple of the Storm Sect. Sumo asks what they're doing there, and he says they're searching for the realm of the Cloud Spirit. Sumo is surprised to hear this and asks where he got this information. The guy says it was someone from the Green Vine Sect. With that, Sumo throws him to the ground. Yuzu grabs his cloak, begging for his life, but the protagonist replies that it's a pity, but he needs to die. As he begs for mercy, he's burned by blue flames. After that, Sumo tells Chao Yang they're leaving and she agrees. From one of the trees, a hand emerges and Lin Yi falls to the ground. Yuzu appears and asks what this Cloud Spirit business is. She hits the rock angrily, telling him to get up quickly, and says they're going east to check what they're up to. Sumo lights a fire and prepares the furnace. Once it's lit, they just have to wait for the elixir to condense. While Chao Yang brings rabbits for them to eat, she says they might be close to the secret place since they're encountering so many people. Sumo says unfortunately he still doesn't have all the answers. Chao Yang says on her journey she heard some information. It seems there are 3 groups searching for this secret place, and in the future, the 3 leaders will personally come to the Jade Dragon Range. Sumo is shocked to hear that the 3 leaders will come. Chao Yang explains that the Vine Sect was looking for a jewel. When they found out, it had already been taken and their movement started. Sumo contemplates all this information and Chao Yang tells him to relax. The meal is ready. He realizes that the opportunity he stole from Lin Yi is causing a chain reaction. He says things are starting to make sense now while she eats. Finally, he feels hungry, saying it smells good, and she hands him some meat. The furnace makes a sound and they turn to see what it is. He approaches, saying they're herbam pills. Upon opening one, smoke begins to emerge. He managed to produce exceptional pills and puts them away. He takes one out and gives it to Chao Yang, saying it's her reward. She is very happy and thanks him, and he says she needs to enhance her strength as quickly as possible to be of any use. It was a compliment and a jab at the same time. He lies down on the rock, saying she has 8 days. She should make good use of that time. She asks why, and he says that's when the entrance to the secret realm will open. Until then, she should practice. Immediately, she sits down and starts training, but then she starts snoring from hunger, right? Seeing him lying down, she goes to cook some more, saying she needs to train on a full stomach, while Sumo goes to sleep with a smile. In the eastern area of the Dragon Ridge, 3 groups gather. The 3 masters of each sect recognize it as the secret realm of the Cloud Spirit. The guy from Kavanhaki says that Old Tang really found something fascinating. He says it wasn't a big deal while they celebrate that it now belongs to the 3 sects. With the 3 forces together, there can be no failure. Tang says the treasures of the secret realm will be divided among them. In the cave, Chao Yang was sleeping and asks for how long. Sumo was also training. Then she decides to go out to look for something to eat. She sees something fleeing among the bushes and captures a black leopard. It turns to attack her, but the only thing she thinks is that it's delicious. A blue spiritual power hits it, throwing it against the tree. She says that's it for today. Back in the cave, she already prepared it, saying it's delicious. She notices Sumo is still practicing. She's getting a little worried he might miss the entrance time to the realm. However, she just watches him out of curiosity. A butterfly lands on his nose and she reflexively slaps it. But suddenly, she realizes she woke the young master up. She apologizes and Sumo gets up, saying it's time to go to the secret realm. At the entrance, the 3 groups are still there. Linyi is talking to Ruoxui, saying he doesn't believe they infiltrated. She steps on his foot, telling him to shut up. He then points, and she says the show is about to start. A constellation appears, and the leaders say it's finally complete. The 3 attack in that direction, and a golden lightning cuts through the sky. Chao Yang points to Sumo, who says they've already started, but he knows they don't have the key. He tells Chao Yang to hold on and heads in that direction. She's happy, but Sumo warns her they'll have to hurry. The 3 leaders continue concentrating their power in the same place. Suddenly, a golden dragon emerges from them and attacks the core. The blow creates a crack. Chao Yang points to Sumo, who says they're a bit late. She asks what they're going to do, and Sumo says they'll enter right after them. The 3 elders are suffering to keep that place open and conjure a talisman. With it positioned, the crack in the opening remains. Seeing that, Sumo realizes they invested a lot in it. Chao Yang is worried about them entering first, but Sumo says it's okay. The valuable treasures of that place are not obtained immediately. The elders begin ordering their disciples to enter, and the crowd heads for the treasure. Ruoxu elbows Lim Yi, saying through the look, and he follows her suffering. She feels something and suddenly stops, and Lim Yi asks what happened. She says it's nothing and starts running again. In the sky, Sumo feels something and Chao Yang asks what's wrong. He says it's nothing but wonders if it was his imagination. Then the elders will be the last to enter, confident they will seize great opportunities. When everyone enters, Sumo and Chao Yang approach. He touches the entrance and she asks what they're going to do. He pulls the jade key from his pocket and touches the opening, telling her to hold on tight. Inside, Chao Yang is impressed with that place. But Sumo says they have to hurry to find the treasures before them. He grabs her, telling her this place has 9 layers and they need to find the entrance to the next one. Down below, the leaders are ordering all disciples to help search. Despite being in larger numbers, it won't be easy for them to find it. Sumo descends from the sky, hides behind a tree, and covers Chao Yang's mouth. Something then passes by them, and he tells her they'll have to get something first. They pass through the vegetation, and he opens a path, calling her. Upon entering, she comes face to face with a door. Sumo explains that all secret entrances are hidden like this. She says the person who created this thing is very evil. He opens the door and tells them to hurry. Inside, she is impressed. They come across a desert. She's scared, asking how they're going to enter a place like this. But Sumo grabs her hand and goes. Suddenly, a giant centipede appears in front of them. He tells her it's up to her. The centipede begins to prepare a spell, but 2 hands close it. After cultivating for 8 days with the furnace pills, Chao Yang is much stronger. Nearby, Linyi points, saying that's the direction. She hits him on the head, telling him to be more precise. She knows the immortal herb must be somewhere around there. Linyi asks how she knows that. She's about to say it's Sumo, which she remembers, blaming him again. She knows he must be out there with that damn witch Chao Yang. Linyi asks what's wrong, tears in his eyes. She says it's no use wasting time and tells him to keep going. But she gets a shock. The herb had already been taken. Meanwhile, Chao Yang had just defeated the centipede. And as a reward, Sumo gave her the herb. She asks if this isn't the rare herb he got on the first layer. He says yes, but he got many items so she can have it. She thanks him and eats it. While Roxy releases the ground, they're being outmaneuvered again. She starts to wonder if Tsumo is also in that place. Limmy is like a fool walking around, wanting to know what she's talking about. He pokes her face and she screams, asking what he's doing, if he wants to die. She jumps on him and starts beating him and asking for forgiveness. When she stops, he asks if she can please get off him. Chao Yang continues to practice against the desert creatures. Sumo instructs her on how to fight. Gradually, she adapts to the combat and makes better decisions. She punches the creature slightly and activates the Soul Destroyer's spirit, causing an explosion in the entire area and shattering the creature. Chao Yang is exhausted and Tsumo says she fights in a bold way, but she's shocked to see her hand bleeding. Sometime later, she's already practicing again. But she's getting exhausted and it's getting harder and harder to fight these creatures. When she's about to be attacked right in the face, something stops the creature's attack and sends her flying. The creature falls to the ground and Tsumo says that's enough. He uses a healing power on her hand and she thanks him for everything. They then enter a black cave. He says it should be there if he's not mistaken. With a blow, the rocks break and a door appears. This is the third layer, the beautiful field with cherry blossoms. Chao Yang, as always, seems excited, while Sumo tells her to be quiet and stay focused. He warns her that the fragrance of that place is poisonous. She wants to know what it is, but Sumo just continues. He pulls a plant and warns her that it has a hallucinogenic fragrance. Chao Yang is impressed with so much knowledge, but is also starving. He says if that's the case, they'll go to the fourth layer to rest and eat something. At the entrance to the secret realm, the elders are angry. They haven't even found the passage to the second layer yet. The elder says there's only one alternative, and they know he's talking about the divination art. They say it's best not to do that because it consumes vital energy. The guy says it doesn't make sense to waste what would be a few years of life compared to opportunities in this realm. Ruoxi is facing a lion when suddenly her spear is cut. It attacks to bite her, and she has no way to defend herself. Suddenly, Linyi appears and saves her, but the lion jumps to catch them both from behind. Linyi has nothing to do, so he decides to protect her even if he dies. She sees a blade beside her and pulls it. And before the lion can eat him, she manages to hit it in the mouth. With that, the beast falls to the ground. While Linyi keeps screaming he's going to die, Ruoxi wants to know how long he's going to stay on top of her. He apologizes unintentionally but then gets kicked in the balls. She asks if he found the passage, pointing in a direction, saying it's over there. She runs through the thicket and opens some place. Meanwhile, Ruoxi is happily cooking on the fourth layer. She asks Ruoxi if he wants a piece, but he's more concerned about the jade. Ruoxi says he remembers that gem. He got it on the second layer. He says it's a jade used to refine weapons and is extremely rare. It can turn a simple spiritual weapon into a treasure. Ruoxi says it's incredible and asks how he's going to use it. Meanwhile, Linyi and Ruoxi are facing desert creatures. She manages to land a sword strike on the creature's head and finishes it off. She says she didn't expect that. The second layer is indeed full of monsters. She notices Linyi asking and questions what's wrong. He says it's nothing and points in a direction, indicating that the spiritual power is coming from there. She wonders, could it be the door? Linyi says it's not the door. It must be the treasure or something similar. Suddenly, she runs off, saying there's no time. Meanwhile, Ruoxi and Chao Yang were training. Suddenly, Chao Yang feels something and coughs up blood. She gets angry. The last thing she wanted was to disappoint the young master, so she resumes training. Helping her, he realizes she indeed has extremely promising talent. Meanwhile, the elders are cursing. It's been 2 hours, and they haven't found the first entrance. They're cursing all the disciples, calling them useless. Tang then warns about divination. It would cost 10 years of life for each of them. They are frightened, and Tang says it might be even more since it's a secret realm. However, without hesitation, they begin using the power to find the passage. Divination shows the way, and they realize it's very secretive. Immediately, they notify all disciples to move to the second layer. Meanwhile, Chao Yang is waking up from cultivation, realizing that Sumo was assisting her. Suddenly, he gets up and says that since they're both awake, they must head to the fifth layer. However, her stomach is always growling. Linyi and Ruoxi are hiding in the desert. The place they want to go is blocked by the desert Largado. She remembers Sumo mentioning it to her and thinks he's always on her mind. Linyi asks what the problem is. She says that after the Largado is the Jade of Transformation. Linyi asks how she knows that, but she ignores him, saying they have to pass by it quickly. However, suddenly alarmed, he points there. Several beams of light head towards the mountaintop. It's the elders who use divination. Their arrival woke the dragon. They're startled, but Old Ten says the treasures are ahead. They just need to defeat that creature. With that, everyone draws their swords and goes forward. Lin Yi says they can't lose that, but Ruoxu pulls him away. He gets annoyed when they face each other, asking what she wants, but he gets kicked, and she says he's shameless. Down on the ground, he explains he's just afraid they'll get there before them. She says the desert largado shouldn't be underestimated. Meanwhile, Chao Yang is impressed. They just arrived at the next part, and she asks if there's anything to be careful of. Sumo just warns her not to stray from him. They hold hands and move forward. However, smoke starts covering everything, and she can't even see Sumo. She asks what's happening. He explains it's an enchanted mist. One wrong step, and you're trapped forever. There's only one way to escape in this place. Once again, he holds her hand and tells her not to stray. Then they walk in various directions within the mist until they finally reach a waterfall. Seeing the water falling into a cherished place, Chao Yang asks what it is. Sumo says it's the sacred sun fluid. Bathing in that lake prolongs one's longevity and increases one's power. In her case, it might even help stabilize her body. She's startled, saying she doesn't deserve such a thing. He can keep it all for himself. Sumo says it would be a waste to use it alone, especially since it makes no difference if one or two people use it. Meanwhile, the desert dragon is being immobilized by the elders. He's having difficulty because he's being attacked by many at once. Suddenly, he roars, pushing everyone away. Even from afar, Ruoxu and Lin Yi cough up blood. However, she smiles, saying the opportunity has finally come. She knows a technique that will block their presence. As the battle rages on at the hilltop, they sneak around from behind. Inside the cave, they find a treasure, a high-quality spiritual jade. Ruoxu tries to grab it, but strangely, it disappears. They wonder what happened. Meanwhile, Sumo and Chao Yang are in the sacred bath. There's a spiritual curtain between them, preventing each from seeing the other. Chao Yang focuses on her training, and Sumo says he's already absorbed a third. He then takes a pill and says it's time to start. A tornado emerges in the middle of the river, and Chao Yang realizes that the spiritual liquid is being drawn into it. A beam of light cuts through the sky, and she realizes it's advancing even further. If that's the case, she has to put in the effort too. However, as soon as she starts training, she feels some sparks and spits blood. Sumo senses something and lowers the spiritual curtain. She was fainting and about to drown, so he saves her, wondering what that was. There seemed to be golden energy in her head and body. Meanwhile, Ruoxu and Lin Yi were still in the cave. The moment she went to grab the jade, it disappeared. She angrily hits the stone, realizing it was just an illusion. Lin Yi asks if there are any other experts besides the three sects, when suddenly everything starts shaking. The desert dragon had just been defeated, and they had to flee before they were seen. Ruoxu grabs his hand, and they have to hide tightly behind a rock because the guys are already coming. He was going to say something, but she told him to be quiet, wondering what they were going to do. Meanwhile, Lim Yi was suffering in other ways. With Chao Yang on his arm, Sumo said he didn't expect something like this. Her body was suffering from an adverse reaction. Using golden magic, he said that was the only solution. Sometime later, she wakes up remembering she fainted while training. As soon as Sumo appears, she realizes something is wrong. Her vision is blurred. With his hand on her forehead, Sumo warns that she has a problem in her body. She apologizes for delaying him again. He explains that he had to temporarily seal her spiritual power. He summons an herb and says it's for her. That's the medicine the doctor talked about. Chao Yang recognizes it as the jade-colored herb. Sumo says it's exactly that, and he picked it behind the waterfalls. She apologizes for causing so much trouble. He explains that his plan was to create a medicine like her so she could use it. But now in this situation, she'll have to endure extreme pain. She says it's okay. She'll do her best and endure without hesitation. He then presses the herb against her back, warning that it will hurt. And she feels like she's being plunged into a whirlpool. She's losing consciousness underwater, saying it's too cold. Sumo tells her to wake up. She's freezing, but says she needs to endure it for the young master. Seeing her in a block of ice, Katsumo says unfortunately, now everything is in her hands. Meanwhile, the elders arrive in the cave and found nothing. They're going crazy. It doesn't make sense not to have treasure in that place. When suddenly one of the elders said that someone probably took advantage of the fight and came here to steal things. Since they came very quickly, the person must be here in the cave. One of the elders used an illumination technique, and Lin Yi and Katsumo were startled. The golden aura began to spread throughout the room, when suddenly someone shouted that they had something urgent to say. One of the apostles warned that something urgent had happened. Meanwhile, the ice around Chao Yang was starting to crack, and Katsumo knew she was about to awaken. As soon as she opened her eyes, an explosion occurred. Sumo couldn't see clearly what it was. He turned away to see nothing and told her to use the rest of the sacred fluid. She stayed there bubbling while Sumo continued training. In the cave, the elders were informed that they had found the third layer. They were startled and began laughing, saying they had to take advantage since it was quick this time. The others wanted to resolve it in the cave, but they decided to go along. As soon as they left, he fell from the ceiling. He celebrated while she told them to get off, punching him in the chin. He apologized and asked what they were going to do. She said they were going to follow them. Limmy said it was very dangerous. Soon they would realize that these clothes weren't theirs. Suddenly a claw fell on his face while undressed. He looked a lot and got slapped, being called a pervert. Meanwhile, the elders had just arrived in the 3rd layer. They commented that the resting area was on the 4th layer, while one of them said he recognized one of those flowers. The followers were picking the flowers, saying they were beautiful and they should take some. The elder was about to turn around and tell them to hurry to the 4th layer when suddenly he saw the 2 dead on the ground. People were all fighting each other, hitting one another, and the chief remembered that those flowers were hallucinogenic. Tang told everyone to cover their nose and mouth. However, suddenly one of the elders hit the other in the face. It was too late. They were already fighting each other. After beating themselves up, they decided to use the only thing that could save them there. Tang took a talisman that could remove any restriction and toxin. There was only one. The other elder grabbed it from his hand, saying not to be stingy. They needed to use it for the sake of the disciples. When he activated it, a golden light was emitted. Meanwhile, Chao Yang had finished absorbing the sacred fluid. Sumo immediately announced they would move to the next layer, and they flew up to the waterfall. At the top, they found a cut snake, and Saxumo said it was nothing serious. He then showed that the door was right there and warned that despite the treasures, there weren't many dangers in the 6th layer. In the 4th layer, after using the talisman, people were regaining consciousness. Since it was the resting point, they could now recover. However, one of them wanted to go straight to the 5th layer to use the essence there to heal their injuries. Lindy is telling Ruoxu that he's heard of the so-called essence of the sacred sun. When they entered the 3rd layer, Lindy was affected by the hallucinogenic powers. However, Ruoxu kicked him in the head and warned him again. If he does something like that again, he will die. Facing the mountain, she thinks she just needs the essence of the sacred sun to advance. The 6th layer was a giant arena, and suddenly a beam of light fell in the middle of it and a bald man appeared. Chao Yang asked what it was, and Saxumo said it was a puppet. She was a bit confused, and he explained that it was the challenge of the 6th layer. The Baldy said that if he's defeated, he'll have the right to go to the 7th, or he'll die at his hands. Sumo pushed Chao Yang and said it was up to her. He made himself comfortable and said she needed to get familiar with the new power. She was still somewhat confused when Baldy was already on her back and almost hit her. She then understood the challenge and started the fight. The elders with their group had just arrived on the 5th layer. The bearded guy ordered everyone to advance quickly. However, it was that smoke where you get lost forever, and with that, they realized they had made a terrible decision. Meanwhile, Chao Yang was facing Baldy, and Saxumo was observing her entire strategy. Even though she had evolved, she still couldn't deal with him. When she looked back, she couldn't tell where he was. From the sky, a hand appeared, punching like on this video, kids. Oops, caught in the act.